We've created most of the content for our home page, and we're almost ready to get started on styling. First, we need to learn how to create separate CSS and HTML files and then connect them together. First, let's organize our code by creating a new folder called CSS. To do that, just right-click in the File Tree area here, anywhere where there's blank space, and select New Folder. Then, in lowercase, type CSS and hit Enter. Now, inside of that folder, we want to add a file called normalize.css. You can download this file from the project files associated with this video next to the video player. Once you've downloaded the project files, simply unzip them and then select the normalize.css file and drag it into the file tree area in the darkened space that says Drop Files to Upload. Now, you can move normalize CSS into the CSS folder. So I'm going to drag normalize.css into the CSS folder, close my images folder there, and you can see normalize.css is now inside of our CSS folder. Now, I've already opened up normalize.css, but if you haven't already done so, just go ahead and click on normalize.css in the file tree, and it will open up in the text editing area. Now, for the first time, we have two files open here. So you can see that our text editing area actually has tabs, just like a web browser. We can click on one of these tabs and drag it to rearrange our tabs. This won't have any effect on the way our files are organized in the file tree, but if you want to rearrange the tabs just to stay a little bit more organized, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to close a tab, just go ahead and hit the X. But let's go ahead and take a look at normalize.css. If I take the scroll bar here and scroll down, you'll notice that it's a pretty long file with lots of code. This is a special CSS file that will reset the default browser styles. In other words, every browser applies their own default styling so that headlines are larger than paragraphs, bulleted lists have bullets, and so on. There are some other inconsistencies between these default styles from one browser to another. So before we add our own styling, we want to use normalize.css to basically level out the playing field. Now, we've included this file into our project in the file tree, but that doesn't mean it's included in our HTML. We need to include it into our HTML file here so that it knows this file exists, just like we included our images previously. So let's look at index.html and focus in on the head area, which again is different than the header. So don't get confused there. Now, just below our title, I'm going to use what's called a link element. This is different than an anchor element and actually does not link to another page like you might expect. It actually just links to other files so that our web page knows they exist. So I'm going to type an attribute inside of my link element here, and I'm going to give it the value style sheet. So the attribute is rel style sheet. And then, similar to an anchor tag, we're going to use the href attribute, and we're going to type the relative file path css/normalize.css. And then we'll go ahead and close our link element. I want to go over relative file paths one more time very quickly because it is so important. This href file path here is referencing the CSS folder relative to the index.html, and then inside of it is normalize.css. You can see that normalize.css is inside of the CSS folder because it's slightly indented, whereas index.html is not as indented, so you know that it sits at the same level as these other folders, and it's not inside of a folder. Now, similar to other elements that we've seen previously, this link element is self-closing, and it has rel, or relationship attribute, which describes the relationship between the current document and the linked document. In this case, the linked document is a style sheet that's going to add some style to our HTML. Next is the hyperlink reference attribute, which you'll recognize from the anchor element, like I said previously. We've dug into the CSS directory, and then we've selected our normalize.css file. Now, let's go ahead and save and open up our preview. And as you can see, there haven't really been any dramatic changes just yet. A few things are spaced slightly differently, and the font may look slightly different, but that's about it. You'll also notice that there's no bullet points on our unordered list anymore. This CSS reset will lay the foundation for our own custom CSS, which we'll add on top. We'll get into custom CSS very soon.